I didn't cry when my parents told me they weren't coming to my graduation. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stared at the wall and listened as they explained they'd already booked a resort trip with my sister. That moment should have broken me. Instead, it clarified everything, so I made a different call. I invited the people who had shown up for me when no one else did. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn anyone. On graduation day, the cameras were live, the auditorium was full, and my parents were watching from a hotel room thinking they'd made a harmless choice. My name is Luna. I was 22 when this happened, and for most of my life, I was the easy child. The quiet one. The one who didn't need much. That's what my parents liked to say whenever someone asked about me. My sister, on the other hand, needed everything. At our family table, conversations always leaned in her direction. Her job stress, her plans, her disappointments. My parents listened to her the way people lean closer when they're afraid of missing something important. When I spoke, they nodded politely, eyes already drifting, waiting for me to finish so they could return to what really mattered. Our house looked warm from the outside. Framed photos on the walls, holiday decorations still up weeks too long, the smell of coffee in the mornings. But inside, there was a quiet hierarchy everyone understood without saying out loud. My sister was the center. I orbited. When I got into college, the excitement lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then my mom said, "That's great, honey," and turned to ask my sister about a trip she was planning. I paid my own tuition through scholarships and part-time work. I covered my own bills, my own payments, my own everything. My parents helped my sister with her car, her apartment, anything she needed. When I once asked for help with textbooks, my mom smiled and said, "You're so independent, Luna. You'll figure it out." I learned not to ask again. By the time graduation approached, I already knew how the conversation would go. I still called. A part of me needed to hear it directly. My mom didn't even pause. "We already have plans with your sister," she said. My dad added that she was going through a stressful time and needed them more. Neither of them asked what graduating meant to me. I hung up the phone and sat on my bed, staring at the cap and gown hanging from my closet door. I felt the familiar sting in my chest, but underneath it was something new. Not sadness, not anger, clarity. I realized then that I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was done hoping they'd suddenly see me. And for the first time in my life, I started to consider what it might look like to choose myself instead. The thing about being overlooked your whole life is that you stop expecting anything. You tell yourself it doesn't hurt anymore, even when it does. You learn how to swallow disappointment quietly and keep moving. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. My parents missed my high school award ceremony because my sister had a work event. When I won a small writing prize my sophomore year of college, my mom said she was proud, then immediately asked if I could help my sister move that weekend. Every milestone in my life felt like background noise to something louder, something more urgent, something that wasn't me. I worked part-time all through school, late nights, early mornings. I learned how to stretch a paycheck and prioritize which bills could wait a few days. Meanwhile, my sister talked casually about payments my parents covered for her as if it was just how the world worked. When she teased me about my little writing projects, my parents laughed along. Not maliciously, just comfortably, like they didn't see a reason to stop her. By the time graduation came around, I wasn't surprised they chose a resort trip over me. But that didn't make it hurt less. It just made it familiar. A few days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table in my best friend's house helping her mom fold laundry. It was one of those ordinary afternoons that feel warmer than they should. The radio hummed softly. The windows were open. Her dad walked by and asked how graduation planning was going. I hesitated before answering. Then I told them the truth. There was a pause. Not the awkward kind I was used to, but the heavy kind. Her mom set the towels down slowly. Her dad shook his head like he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. "That's not right," her mom said. "This is a big day." They didn't try to fix it. They didn't offer advice. They just listened. And then her mom smiled at me, the kind of smile that makes your chest ache a little. "Well," she said gently, "we'd love to be there if you want us." The words caught me off guard. I hadn't planned on saying yes. I hadn't planned on anything. But in that moment, something shifted. I realized I had been treating my parents' absence as a rule I had to obey instead of a choice I could respond to. So I said yes. That night, I sat alone in my room and stared at my phone. I thought about calling my parents to tell them, to explain, to soften it somehow. But then I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing people who showed up. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. And once that door opened in my mind, I couldn't close it again. Once I said yes, everything became strangely quiet. Not peaceful exactly. More like the calm that comes before something irreversible. There was no dramatic fallout. My parents didn't suddenly call to change their plans. My sister didn't notice anything at all. Life continued the way it always had, with me on the margins and them at the center. And for the first time, I stopped fighting that reality. What my family didn't know was that my life had been moving in a different direction for a long time. I'd been working quietly while I was in school, writing late at night, revising scripts between classes, taking feedback, getting better, learning how to survive rejection without letting it hollow me out. I never talked about it at home because no one asked, and eventually I learned not to volunteer information that would be ignored. A few weeks before graduation, my manager pulled me aside after a long meeting. We were standing in a hallway that smelled faintly like burnt coffee and printer toner. He told me the project I'd been working on had moved forward in a bigger way than expected. There would be public recognition. He asked if I'd be comfortable with that happening at graduation in front of my school. I remember blinking at him, caught off guard. Then I thought about the empty seats that were supposed to be reserved for my parents. Yes, I said. That's fine. I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to hide it, but because it didn't occur to me to share good news with people who had never made space for it before. I filled out the forms the school sent. For the section labeled family guests, I listed the names of the people who had asked me how I was doing without being prompted. As graduation day got closer, I expected to feel nervous. Instead, I felt grounded. I pressed my cap, laid out my gown, and folded it carefully over the back of my chair. When my mom texted me a photo of the resort view, I stared at it for a moment before setting my phone face down. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. Lighter. More solid. I realized something then that I wish I'd understood years earlier. Losing people who never really showed up isn't a loss. It's a release. And as I turned off the light and crawled into bed, I knew that the next day wouldn't just be about finishing school. It would be about who got to stand with me when everything I'd built finally became visible. Graduation day arrived without drama. No last-minute calls. No sudden change of heart. The morning light slipped through the curtains, soft and unbothered, like the world wasn't holding its breath the way I was. I got dressed slowly. The fabric of the gown felt heavier than I expected, the sleeves brushing against my wrists as I adjusted it. My cap sat crooked at first, and I laughed quietly to myself as I fixed it in the mirror. I didn't see a girl waiting to be noticed anymore. I saw someone who had finished something hard. When we arrived at the auditorium, the air buzzed with noise. Families filled the rows, hugging, laughing, taking photos that would end up framed or forgotten in drawers. I scanned the crowd out of habit, even though I already knew where my parents would not be sitting. Then I saw them. My best friend's parents were waving from the family section, her mom already holding a tissue, her dad grinning like this was his own child's moment. Something warm settled in my chest. Not sadness, not longing. Gratitude. As we lined up backstage, the lights dimmed and the music swelled. Names were called. One by one, students crossed the stage. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, heart-steady, hands relaxed. I shook the dean's hand and accepted my diploma, smiling into the applause. It was loud, genuine, and for the first time, it felt like it was meant for me. I thought that would be the peak of the day. I was wrong. After the last name was called, the dean returned to the microphone. He paused, glancing toward the wings of the stage, then back at the audience. Before we conclude, he said, we have a special recognition from one of our industry partners. A ripple moved through the room. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my face neutral, eyes fixed ahead. A woman stepped onto the stage, confident, polished. I recognized her immediately. She had been part of my professional life for years, long before my family ever cared to ask what I was doing with my time. She took the microphone and spoke clearly, calmly, the kind of voice that commands attention without asking for it. One of your fellow graduates has contributed to a project that exceeded every expectation we had, she said. Her work became the foundation of a major production currently moving forward. The room went quiet. I could feel people shifting in their seats. She said my name. I stood, legs slightly unsteady now, and walked back onto the stage. The lights were brighter up close, warm against my skin. I accepted the folder she handed me, my fingers tightening just enough to remind myself to breathe. She spoke about the project in careful, rounded numbers. A significant budget, a long-term opportunity, a commitment that would change my life. I didn't look for my parents. I didn't need to. Then she said it. We would also like to acknowledge the parents who supported her throughout this journey. Time slowed. I heard a few murmurs ripple through the audience. She turned not toward the empty seats my parents would have occupied, but toward the section where my best friend's parents were sitting. Would you please join us on stage? For a split second, they didn't move. Her mom looked around confused, her hand hovering near her chest. Her dad leaned in, whispering something I couldn't hear. I met their eyes and nodded. They stood. The walk up the aisle felt longer than my own walk across the stage. The audience watched, curious, uncertain. When they reached us, her mom was already crying. Not quietly, openly. The kind of crying that comes from being overwhelmed by something you never expected to be part of. The woman handed them an envelope and a framed certificate. She explained it simply. A recognition gift. A thank you for believing, for showing up, for being present. The amount was stated once clearly without fanfare. The room reacted instantly. Gasps, applause, people standing. Her mom covered her mouth. Her dad wrapped an arm around her shoulders, eyes shining. I stood there, letting it happen, letting the truth exist in the open. The cameras captured everything, the expressions, the confusion turning into understanding, the pride that had nothing to do with blood. Hundreds of miles away, my parents were watching from a resort room. I know this because later when I checked my phone, the proof was there. But in that moment, I didn't think about them at all. I thought about every night I'd spent working alone, every bill I'd paid myself, every time I'd swallowed a story because no one wanted to hear it, and I felt something settle into place. This was what showing up looked like. When the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled out into the afternoon sun. My best friend's parents hugged me tightly over and over like they were afraid letting go would make it disappear. "We're so proud of you," her mom kept saying. "We're so proud." I smiled, nodded, thanked people as they congratulated me. I took photos, I laughed, I breathed. Then my phone started vibrating. At first, I ignored it. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but it kept going. Buzz after buzz after buzz. When I finally pulled it out of my pocket, the screen was almost completely filled with notifications, missed calls, messages, more missed calls, 78 of them. Texts layered on top of each other, some frantic, some angry, some pleading. My mom's name over and over, my dad's number. My sister suddenly desperate. I didn't open a single one. I turned the phone face down and slid it back into my pocket. We went to dinner afterward, the four of us, at a small place not far from campus. Nothing fancy, just warm food, clinking glasses, and the low hum of conversation. Her dad insisted on making a toast. Her mom kept reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. At one point, my phone buzzed again, and her mom glanced at it gently. "You don't have to answer that," she said. "I know," I replied, and I meant it. The story spread faster than I expected. Clips from the ceremony appeared online. Local coverage picked it up. People shared it, commented, argued, applauded. Some called it cruel. Others called it justice. I didn't engage with any of it. My parents tried everything. They called mutual friends. They left messages with extended family. My sister posted a public message about how proud she was, how she'd always believed in me. It didn't land the way she hoped. People remembered things. Screenshots resurfaced. Old comments. Old jokes at my expense. The calls didn't stop. Neither did my silence. A few days later, my parents reached out through a third party asking for a conversation. They said there had been a misunderstanding, that they deserved to be recognized, that they were my parents. I listened as the message was relayed to me, then I thanked the person and went back to my work. Because here was the truth they didn't want to accept. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they missed the moment. And that door had already closed. In the days that followed, my life didn't explode. It settled. I went back to work. Meetings, revisions, long hours that felt different now, not heavier, cleaner. The kind of tired that comes from building something real. My best friend's parents checked in on me every morning, not to ask for updates, just to ask how I was feeling. Sometimes I didn't know how to answer, so I said okay, and that was enough. My parents kept trying. Through relatives, through old family friends. They wanted to explain, to be seen, to reclaim something they thought was theirs. I never responded. Silence wasn't punishment. It was a boundary. Eventually, the calls slowed. The messages stopped. Life moved on the way it always does when you stop feeding the chaos. What surprised me most wasn't how calm I felt. It was how little guilt remained. I had spent years believing that love meant endurance, that family meant tolerance. Now I understood something simpler. Love shows up. Family stays. And once you learn that difference, you don't unlearn it. Today, when people ask me about my family, I don't hesitate anymore. I talk about the ones who showed up, the ones who sat in the front row, the ones who chose me without conditions. Blood didn't make them my family. Presence did. If you've ever been overlooked by the people who were supposed to stand beside you, know this: you're not wrong for choosing yourself. You're not cold for closing a door that kept you small. If this story felt familiar, share it in the comments. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.